President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi won Egypt's presidency back in 2014 by a landslide. And he seems set for another. The only man to stand against President Sisi is Musa Mustafa Musa. All other challengers have either been detained, disqualified, or cited pressure for abandoning their campaigns.
So I don't think that Musa is a legitimate candidate. As the news reports have shown, he was previously a supporter of Sisi as a candidate. He lobbied and advocated for him, and for him to then announce himself as the opposition, just hours before the deadline, shows that somebody made a call to him and said, I need you to be a placeholder, so that it is not so apparent that Sisi is destined to win the election.
The most recent to leave the race was former General and Army Chief of Staff Sami Anan. He was arrested soon after announcing his plan to run, the army accusing him of not getting proper permission and forging documents. Abdul Munaim Abul Fatouh, a leading opposition figure and former candidate in the 2012 race, was also arrested, accused of alleged ties with the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood. Former Prime Minister Ahmed Shafiq's plan to stand was short-lived. He withdrew his candidacy after he was deported from the United Arab Emirates, where he had been living in exile, and he was then arrested in Egypt. Khalid Ali, an opposition leader who also ran in the 2012 presidential polls, said he was barred from standing because of a jail term that he contests. Mohammed Anwar Sadat, the nephew of Egypt's assassinated former President Anwar Sadat, opted to cancel his campaign. And after Egyptian Army Colonel Ahmed Kunsawa said he would run, he was given 6 years in prison on charges over opinions contrary to what Egyptian officials called the requirements of military order.
For the military to then target former generals who used to be leaders under the former Mubarak regime shows a level of desperation and a level of aggression. I don't think he's going to be replaced through civilian elections. I think he'll be replaced, if he is replaced, through a military coup by another general.
International rights groups have called this election a farce, and some in the opposition have suggested a boycott. Sisi's rise to the presidency came after the 2013 military coup that deposed his democratically elected predecessor, Mohamed Morsi. And as it stands, Sisi looks poised to stay on for a second term. Miriam Nahond, Al Jazeera.
7 years ago, Arab Spring started in Tunisia with a very mundane incident that happens millions of times in the last 56 years, and it's just a normal, an average fruit seller been abused, like millions of Tunisians been abused under Ben Ali, but he sparked, dust himself on fire, and that was the spark of the revolution. The Egyptian picked Arab a few weeks later, and 20 million people went to the street, and the millions of them at Tahrir Square, and then we've seen the most glorious 18 days of Egyptian history that toppled 30 years of dictatorship, and events did not turn the way everybody expected, and the military is back, and Egypt now seeing the most regressive military regime, police state. So our guest today wrote another book addressing the things that happened in the last seven years, and what went wrong and what went right. And so we have here Denis Campbell. He's a co-host, producer of the Three Muckrakers, and the editor and founder of UK Progressive Magazine. Welcome to the show, Denis. And the new book, Breathing Hopes and Fear: Egypt in the Last 7 Years. In a way, you want to rewrite what happened, and it took you 7 years to kind of project and look at the first book and what happened in January 25th. So you had a chance to look and reflect and respect. And people say history is written by assassins or written by the victorious. So,
well, in 2011, when this all unfolded, I was just somebody who was a journalist who happened to be watching the events unfold on a combination of live television and social media. There was a program that was used back then called the Tweet Deck, and you could literally follow 7 or 8 people at the same time across an expanse of 2 screens here, and you could see live commentary as it was happening. The BBC was also doing a very good job of covering what was happening on the ground, as were CNN International. And I always say CNN International because that's the real news organization, not the CNN that we see today. And Al Jazeera English was also doing a fabulous job. So basically, I'm looking at you through 2 very large computer screens, which has not changed since 7 years, except maybe they've gotten slightly better resolution and slightly larger. But they really helped us to see in real time what was happening. And having just witnessed, as you were talking about Mohamed Bouazizi in Tunisia, basically caused the very corrupt and very brutal regime of Ben Ali to come to a screeching halt. It was an incredible moment for the world. And we had this situation where we knew on the 25th of January something was going to happen in Egypt, but we were also very skeptical because lots of big demonstrations had been planned in the past, but they never come to fruition, largely because the secret police rout people out and find a way to stop things. And, the threats of the permanent state of emergency under Mubarak were such that people would not really have a chance to do anything. So we weren't terribly optimistic, and the initial news reports were not that promising. I mean, a few thousand people showed up, but what then happened over day 2 and day 3 of the crisis was the incredible overreaction by the secret police. And when you look at the dictator's playbook, you will see that, they don't stay in power unless they know how to stay in power. So that was problem number 1. Problem number 2 was that you had a group of fairly young people. I mean, most people think they were students. No, they'd been students roughly a decade or so before. So these were people in their, late 20s, early 30s, who now were sort of like the dog that caught the car. You know how a dog constantly chases the car until the car is out of sight? Well, this time they caught the car, and they've got their teeth firmly in the rear wheel of the car, and now they're sitting there and they're thinking, now what? What do I do now? And I liken it in some ways to a similar movement that was happening at the time called Occupy Wall Street. This was a group of people that got a lot of attention. I'm sorry?
It wasn't inspired by Tahrir Square?
Yeah, it was in many respects, and what you had was this feeling of emboldening, of getting the message out that we needed change. But what happened was the skills that were necessary to bring about a revolution weren't going to be the skills that they were going to be able to use to change the government and to change the system in a way that would benefit more people. So what happened was the better organized group of people, the people who had been basically banned inside the Muslim Brotherhood, who were, basically in government in exile, for lack of a better word, were far better organized. They knew far better how to run a political campaign. And the only person that could step forward for this group of young people was Mohammed al-Baradei. And they said, well, wait a minute, he wasn't even there. He wasn't part of this. So why is he speaking for those who... And so you had this thing devolved, just as you did with Occupy Wall Street, into this commune sort of like environment where everybody wanted to sit around, and I liken it in many ways to the United States Democratic Party. Everybody has an opinion, and every opinion has to be heard, but nobody steps forward as a leader to say, no, we're going to take that hill. So you have a situation where Democrats and people of this, they fall in love. But those in the Muslim Brotherhood, the Republican Party in the United States, they fall in line because there's somebody to fall in line behind. And in this case, it was Mohamed Morsi election. And it was between him and a former supporter of Mubarak in the final election. You ended up with somebody who, by the time you got through it almost a year later, was just, oh, yeah, okay, great. He's the guy that's going to do it. And like most people who win presidential elections, for some reason he felt he now had a mandate to bring about a theocracy. That was far from the case in what to that point had been a very, very more secular Egypt. People practiced their religion, but they weren't as fanatical as the Morsi government. The story of your nephew became very, very important to me because as he began to overreach, Morsi began to overreach and rise in power, the military under Tantawi said, we can't have that. That's not going to happen. And all of a sudden, charges were brought, he was pulled out of office, and we ended up with El-Sisi. Now, that's the short version of what's in the book. And what I did back in 2011 was I wrote the original book, which was Egypt Unshackled, and I decided, well, it would be great to say what happened over the last 7 years, but if you didn't pay attention 7 years ago, you needed to see this. So I sort of started with an opening chapter or so that explained what had happened, then put the original book, but I cut it down quite a bit because there was, as you said, there's so many people that were involved that are no longer there. And then we added the analysis at the end of the last 7 years.
You open your new book with a quote from a Tunisian poet. Really, his word resonates even way, even we were in the 60s, wherever. But even actually, his verses is الشعب راد الحياة فلا بد أن يستجيب القدر. It even became the Tunisian national anthem. What was the story about that poet and that poetry?
Well, poetry's long and literature have long had just been a very strong part of my life, and I always try to find in anything that I write. I mean, even when I'm writing about Trump here and Donald Trump, deplorable bully, I always try to find verses that help to crystallize the issue, the struggle, etc. When I wrote this new one, I went back to Dickens' Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of time. It was the worst of times because it was the best of times after the 18 days. People were buoyant for weeks. They were excited. It was hopeful. And then it quickly became the worst of times. And it has stayed that way for quite some time. And when my publisher and I were trying to come up with a title for this, I went back through, and I don't have it here next to me, but I'd hold it up for you. But it's probably about this thick, this book of all of the lyrics of W.S. Gilbert, from Gilbert and Sullivan, all of their musicals. And I remembered Trial by Jury, because I both sung it and played the judge at one point many moons ago. And I remembered this song that we sang at the very beginning of the operetta called Hark, the Hour of 10 is Sounding. And it's about a divorce trial. It's not a major piece of literature.
Not romantic.
Yeah, not. But you get to the end of it, and they say, the Hark, the Hour of 10 is Sounding, that halls of justice, hearts abounding, breathing hope and fear. And for some reason, that line, breathing hope and fear, summarized where the Egyptian people were from 2011 the 18 days right through to today. I mean, there are still people that are hopeful, but there's so much fear as to what's about to come.
More and Sisi now that he got the whole country by the balls. He's running for an election with no legitimate opposition. It's almost by himself. And as you say, he's still terrified. And this hysteria that is going on in his campaign, where you see his pictures everywhere you look. And somebody was telling me that we don't see a picture of an art anymore. We don't see a picture of a bird. It's all Sisi's pictures. And matter of fact, now they coined him Mona Sisa. Wherever you look, you find is looking at you. And so there's a lot of people buying into this, providing security. It's not so much now Putin is Putism that's supporting this guy. And also the same thing in Egypt, Sisism. The people who will say, wipe them out, kill them all the people who are not voting are traitors. So,
well, how different is that from what you're seeing with Trump and his followers?
I think you're right. You might have some. It's across the board that people, now fear more than hope, and we can break it down. But let's talk about the people like you, the journalist. You said the Egyptian Revolution, 7 years, it really changed journalism, changed the way people report, and also not the fact that you are using social media and Twitter to actually to be ahead of the events, but also people actually they want to help those young Egyptians that are sitting in Tahrir Square. And what's your role, and as a journalist, what's your role also as an activist?
Yeah, it was an interesting time because your natural tendency is to be completely objective, and I would say probably if you look back at the beginning of the conflict, it was sort of isn't this interesting? And what I saw happening inside of me was, as the 18 days played out from about day 6 or 7, you found yourself asking questions and beginning to look for answers as to, well, wait a minute, why are we getting that kind of a reaction? Why are they running through horseback and camel into the middle of the square, to attack those people who are peacefully protesting? Yes, they are getting a lot of attention, but when I advise clients on public relations or public affairs, I always tell them, I said, look, every business, every company, every person can survive a one-day story. Okay? I mean, we have bad news that comes out there, and if the public relations people and are able to get the CEO to climb down off of the mountaintop, behave themselves for 24 hours, the attention span of the viewer is so short it's going to go away. You're not going to pay any attention to it. But by having Mubarak chase everybody down for 2 full days, that made it a day 2, a day 3, until we were on the bridge on day 4 story that then captivated the globe. Because, like me as a journalist, most people were looking at this and saying, well, why is the government reacting this way? It doesn't make any sense. And that's pretty much where we were. As I began to do this, I noticed something very interesting happen. I think I started with about 2,500 followers on Twitter. And by the time the 18 days were over, I had something like 11,500. Because people were very interested in what was happening. And they were pretty much basically saying, don't pay attention to, the traditional media that are out there just sort of using their talking points and, talking heads. Follow this guy because he seems to be listening to the right sources and making an effort to set the record straight. And I think that was one of the things that I did. Even though my heart was with the demonstrators on a personal basis, my goal was to also fight the propaganda machine, both here in the UK and the United States, because if you watched Fox News, for example, as many of your listeners do, you saw a completely different story about the revolution than you saw on MSNBC. And I think what I tried to do there was to say, play it straight down the middle. You always knew when America was waking up for the day because a bunch of fake news things began to start coming out. And I felt very much responsible for being sort of a journalistic policeman to say, no, that's not what happened. Check here, check here, check here. Get your sources right before you just start spewing garbage, which is really what they were doing at that point. So, and I think people respected that. Two, I also got a lot of friends that I still have to this day from the media, because we were kind of, for lack of a better word, we were banging the jungle drums. Okay, and we were saying, no, don't go that way, go this way. We've heard reports there's a problem over here. And so we began communicating via direct message. For example, Anderson Cooper and his crew were pinned down in an apartment building, and they were trying to get out so they could move from one place to another. And I had one of his producers, Ram Gopal, who's still there at CNN. And, between myself and two others, we managed to find a safe way for him and his crew to get out, who's a very recognizable person, right at the time that Christian Amanpour was landing at Egypt Airport and going to meet with Mubarak. So it was a bizarre time, but it was so exciting. I mean, you were really sitting on the edge of your seat for 18 days. And, when it was over, it was a bit of a withdrawal. And it was my wife who said to me, she said, well, what are you going to do now? I don't know, just go on to the next story. That's what a journalist does.
We'll have to talk to each other.
Well, that ain't going to happen.
Yeah. But what is the role of traditional media in your research of reclaiming Egypt by the military and making those propaganda, now demonizing the revolution, demonizing the brotherhood, and kind of magnify al-Sisi's role and military role? Now some people will look at Sisi as the savior and look at the revolution as troublemaker with the one that again. So is there still a role for traditional media?
Well, you've got a confluence of factors that occurred there. First of all, go back if you can, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will remember this, but most people don't, to about the 14th or 15th day of the conflict, the revolution itself. That was the darkest hour, because nobody knew what to do next. And what was happening was the older generation, the parents, were tired of not being able to go to the shop and get bread, were tired of not being able to do the things they wanted to do. They felt shut into their homes. They were talking to their young people, their family members, and saying, look, stop now. You got what you wanted. Look at what's happened. You got a lot of attention. But everybody that was involved in it had also reached that low point where they said, if we stop now, we're dead. They will round us up and they will kill us all, which to many extents is what happened even after. But, you had that point until Wael Ghonim was released from prison. And he went on television and he did that tearful interview on live television. And all of a sudden, 8 million people were on the street the next day. So you need to have moments like that. But underneath that was this simmering older generation of people that was saying, I'm tired of the upset. I'm tired of the uncertainty. I'm tired of our country constantly being in turmoil. And that's what drove everyone to that point of, even after when Morsi took over and became president, he tried to make it a theocracy. This is not what we want. We'd rather have Mubarak than have that. And I think that's what made the rise of al-Sisi that much easier, because he said, look, I'm going to bring back control the rule of law, and make sure your life is normal again. And for a lot of people, that was a fairly attractive process, and that's why he was able to get to where he was. For the rest of us, we looked at that and said, oh my God, this is not going to help, but that's what it was.
You have a chapter in your new book, The Revolution Was Televised and Tweeted, and I think you alluded to that now. So now the social media and Twitter and Facebook as a platform for sharing information and news, now they've been discredited. The CEOs now of social media, Google and all of this, they're going to be questioning, and they're going to have some answer to do they really those people control do you know what they're doing, and how it's going to affect journalism and the legitimacy of those mediums.
Well, it has dramatically affected media. I mean, if you listen to any of the morning programs, the first thing they try to do is, what has the president tweeted today? Because he's making policy by tweet. He fired his Secretary of State by tweet. He attacks North Korea by tweet. So it has become a part of the lexicon. It's become a part of the way of life for so many people that follow the media. The problem is that I think you're living in the Wild West. We've got a situation where these firms were allowed to grow. They were allowed to make a ton of money without any regulation whatsoever. And now it's becoming clear, and my understanding is the Jon Snow interview this evening, this is Tuesday the 20th, is going to be so explosive. It's going to talk about how Cambridge Analytica delivered the United States presidency through fake news and misinformation to Donald J. Trump. Now, I believe that is treasonous, and I believe that is the true beginning of the end of his presidency. And I think he knows it. That's why he's become so unglued and unstable of late. But to answer your question, these platforms, in particular Facebook and Twitter, are going to see a lot more regulation, whether they want it or not. So the question is, will they become part of the regulation-making process, or will it be foisted upon them? Because when you start to see the rule of law affected and elections affected, it becomes very, very dangerous. Back in 2011, it was dangerous, I suppose, to an authoritarian regime, but we were on the side of angels. We were on the side of, being able to say, wait a minute, no, they're not like that. This is what we're seeing happening. We had Human Rights Watch, we had The Guardian, we had all of these people on the ground. The Guardian now does live blogs all the time, and that started during the Egyptian Revolution, where they live blogged for 18 days. Now, anytime there's anything in the news, the first place I go is The Guardian, because I know they've got 2 or 3 reporters that are doing exactly what I did during the 18 days of the Egyptian Revolution. They're sitting there, they're monitoring social media, they're monitoring all the broadcast channels, they're monitoring what their people are saying, and they're producing a live timeline of what is going on. So, I think there is a future for it in broadcasting, but it's going to be a much more heavily regulated platform.
Denis Campbell is a co-host and producer for the Three Muckrakers and editor and founder of UK Progressive Magazine. He wrote a new book, Breathing Hope and Fear, and it's out there. You can get it through Amazon, Kindles, or whatever they have. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
And, my pleasure. It's always good to be with you, my friend.